Well, good morning. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good.
Whoa.
You're very good. Yeah, before we have you introduce yourself, I just want to situate ourselves where we are in the church life and in the Gospels. So we celebrated Pentecost. So this is the season of Pentecost. And right after Pentecost, we celebrated the Great Commission, looking at what the Great Commission might mean for us. And we determined that the Great Commission was about the Greater Commission, not about going out to nations and making converts of all nations. And then last week, we heard about the raising of Jairus' daughter and the woman with the hemorrhage. And we studied about how Jesus was very, very interested in bodily autonomy for women, right? So that there was that women weren't as affected by the patriarchy, so he was naming that. Now today we have the reading about the harvest. So I'd like to read a poem to you, and then I'll have you introduce yourself. It's entitled, God Gives to Us, Let Us Share. God of love and justice, give us our daily bread in this way. Give us strength to work the land, to sow and harvest and share and eat. Give us the particular bread of each day and every day, not grabbing the bread of tomorrow, nor the meal of the day after, so that we are not tempted to confide in our own security, but instead in you and in your providence. Awaken within us the ambition only that we neither desire nor hoard that which belongs to others, nor strip them unfairly, and learn to respect and to collaborate. Free us to deliver us from the selfish greed, separate us from our temptation to indefinite growth. Do not let us fall into selfish pride, feeling that are merely pretense, nor a love that is seeking only the applaud of others. Grant us a new heart, God, Father, and Mother, so we are able to call each day good and call all of the world sister and brother. May we be neighbors, always sharing whatever we have, for we are seated at the same table in this world, and hope finally to sit with you at the abundant table of your holy realm. So, Anne, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hello. My name is Ann Muir. I'm a retired clergy in the United Church of Christ. I've served churches in California, not up here, but all in California from 1985 to 2018, when I retired and moved up here. So it's been an interesting time in the United Church of Christ. Throughout my career as a local parish pastor, I've been very involved in peace and justice issues, working with homeless issues a lot, working with LGBTQ, working with Planned Parenthood, working with Palestine and the Philippines. That's just who I am, and my top pride in life is that when I was serving in Redding, California, one of the mayor of Redding, in a public speech, said that Ann Muir was the scourge of Redding. That's my badge.
I love it.
And I'll wear it proudly forever.
Yeah. So we met on Committee on Ministry, I believe.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. When you
Yes.
first retired and came to Portland. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And Anne has an exciting ministry story to tell us about going to the Philippines as we get into our questions.
Yeah.
So what phrase from the scripture reading and or the poem held meaning for you?
Well, early on in the scripture, when it says that Jesus looks out on the crowd and sees the pain and the hunger and that he was so moved that he was
His heart was
his
broke.
heart was full.
Yeah.
And that's what strikes me more than
Right,
anything, because that is the description of what our hearts should feel every day.
Right. Instead of seeing that and having that compulsion to feel that compassion, often what we then do is well, who deserves what and why are they
Right,
like
right.
this?
We're
Then
not-
we start the rational thinking about all of this. It
Right.
just stops there. It says his
Yeah.
heart is broken.
Because once his heart is broken, there's no room for all the other
Right, right.
things. And I love the image of a broken heart, because when a heart is broken, what does it do? It opens it.
Mm-hmm.
A broken heart
Has room.
is an open heart,
An open heart.
and it's
Yeah,
time
yeah,
then for
yeah.
things to happen.
Yeah, and it goes on to say from there that he cared for them tenderly,
Mhm,
right? So the
mhm.
next thing was not sitting back and forming a committee and saying, well, my heart is broken about this and maybe about that a little bit too, and
Yeah.
we're now going to navigate. But he
Mhm.
cared for them tenderly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I really, really liked that he said about the harvest to his disciples, what a huge harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to say, on your knees and pray for harvest hands.
Mm-hmm.
Get on your knees. He didn't say he was going to pray,
Mhm.
right? He wants us to get on our knees and pray that we have harvest hands. And then at the end, and don't try to be dramatic by tackling some public enemy, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Don't make this bigger than, he says, go to the lost, confused people right here in the neighborhood.
Mhm.
Like if you need to start with having a broken heart and feeling compassion, we can go to other places, of course,
right.
but if we can't see what we have before us, or if we do go to another country, bring back that broken heart and then let that notice the people we have right in front of us.
Yeah, we usually don't notice the people in front of us. I was born and raised in Montana, and there's a lot of close to reservations. I was born actually on a reservation, though that's just where my parents happened to live when I was born. But there's a lot of help, talk in churches and whatnot, working towards racial equality.
Mhm.
And I even had friends who went out of their way to adopt interracial kids. But God help us if we were to care at all about the indigenous people.
Mhm.
The
Right,
ones
right in
living
front of you, right?
there.
Yeah.
Those the ability to hurt someone that lives right there with you, and while you're thinking somebody else is, it's a way to save the heart from breaking. Actually,
Right. It's a way to protect yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things about this congregation is having the microvillage right here.
Mhm.
We're really getting, I think, firsthand a real engagement with what houseless people go through.
Right.
When
Right.
when their cars are stolen, when they don't have enough to eat, we can't divorce ourselves from seeing
Right.
that anymore. You can walk down the street and turn yourself away from somebody in a tent, but when you have a microvillage living right on the church property, you can't divorce yourself
Mhm.
from it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it takes on that broken heart. I think I can speak for most people in the congregation. From time to time, our hearts break more than not. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything about the poem that caught your interest, or?
Well, it was just really a nice reiteration of what we're saying.
Yeah,
And,
I think I'm going to give it a little critique in the fact that it uses a little bit of language so that we are not tempted to confide in our own security. I get that to a degree, but
Mhm.
I think this is more like total reliance on God, and I wanted
Right.
to see a little bit more responsibility for us as humans,
right.
other
right,
than not being greedy, but having those harvest hands.
right.
right?
Right. Mhm.
Yeah, because we can say we're secure in God, bringing all things to peace and justice, right?
Mhm.
We can say that. I pray for that. But if we don't get up and do anything, that doesn't
Right.
mean anything.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at our illustration. And this was entitled Harvest, so you have it up here.
Mhm.
Now, what can you make out of that?
Well, I love the dual hands there, holding tenderly the bulb, or thinking a pomegranate. It looks sort of a bulb that is starting to grow, and the corporate tenderness of the two hands holding it
in opposite ways, right?
Right. And so
it wasn't like this. It was, like this,
because that's
almost
holding it holy.
womb-like, right?
Pardon?
Womb-like, like the womb.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a safety. It's holding it in tender safetiness. Yeah. That's what I thought. It's quite sweet because there's two, and even, I mean, it presumes two people because, you can hold it like this, but your arms get tired, right?
Right.
I think the symbol presumes that there are two people caring for that.
And I like
bit
the
of life.
fact that it says, in the poem, it said, in the reading, harvest hands, right? So we see hands, we don't see people.
Right.
And we don't even see, other than that one seed or pomegranate or whatever's in the center, we don't see a lot of exactly what the harvest is, other than it's being held tenderly.
Right.
So what do you make of having one of the illustrations in blue and the other one in the gold and yellow and white and silver?
Well, that's interesting because my eyes just went to the blue one.
Yeah, me too.
And
I had the option of picking just the blue one because they had just the blue by itself, and then they had the blue and this one next to it together, and I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I think to me, I mean, I'm kind of in a bad mood right now about the church, not this church, the church.
The church, by and large, the church. Yeah.
And in terms of right now, it seems like in many ways, whether we're progressive or part of the far right, we're more interested in keeping our church alive, keeping our church intact, rather than the harvest. And so to me, the one looks gold and wealthy, and it feels to me like the institutional church.
That's what I
pretending to be harvesting.
Right.
So I like the other one because it feels human to me.
And I think the color blue signifies more of the compassion, more of the everyday, where you've got the tones of golds and silver.
Right.
Like that's a facsimile of what we're doing in church, but it's really not the blue one.
Right.
It's really not the human everyday contact.
Yeah.
Being church every day.
Yeah. And you lose the image inside the gold.
Totally, right? You lose
the image. You have to kind of search for what it is.
And you almost kind of lose the other hand too, right? You can I can
one
pick
hand
up
is
one
almost
hand
gone.
at a time, but I can't pick them up together.
Yeah. So
It almost looks like an octopus
Yeah.
if you look at them together. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So, what were you taught about the meaning of this passage in church way back?
Well, I think that most common it's been used to say that we do our work in order to have filling the pews, right?
Erica would say, "Butts in the pews."
Yeah, and even the sense of that when we're doing mission work, the mission work is to encourage people to join us rather than just being out there. So as you suggested in the earlier too, the harvest, the idea of harvest, that you're bringing something into you, is our Western thinking.
And also to convert people. So
Right, that's the point, to bring them into, that's the whole point, yeah. And, but really, like the writers of the New Testament always do, they flip, the things are flipped, and so to say, get ready for the harvest and get out there and work because people are so oppressed and poor and in need of healing, to that's just, it catches you in saying, okay, I'm ready for the harvest, and say, oh, that's the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
What's in it for me?
Right, right, yeah.
So that's I really love the way it does that to us. But for so much of the time, we don't understand the whether it's humor or digging in of play with words and images that are in the Bible. We take it to mean what we want it to mean, which is to fill the pews.
Yeah, yeah. And it's very interesting that in Pentecost, when the Spirit comes, right? I thought about this a lot this past week. When the Spirit comes, then we jump into Matthew's gospel this year. And Matthew's is the most Jewish gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And Matthew's gospel is all orientated around the idea of justice in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about creating a church. It's not even so much about creating community of like people. It's about creating community through works of justice. So that had a really big impact for me. I think that's my shift of how I understood it at one time, that the harvest meant that we needed to go and bring people to church, like tell your friends to come to church and bring the harvest in and capture it and convert them, make them become members of the church. But I think that from the lens of Matthew's gospel, that he was so Jewish, and his notion of community didn't start with gathering people.
Right.
It started with acts of justice.
Right, right.
And that was prompted by the movement of the Spirit at Pentecost.
Right. But of course, in that, with that, the Jewish and it's in the early, what we think of Christian is still the Jewish time. There's no separation between the people and the church. It's just and human beings, and they're all. So you don't have to bring anyone into church. You just have to take care of everyone. So it's another way we simply have misread the scriptures, and still are in a way that is becoming absurdly evil.
Yeah, and I think, too, what happened was, and this is bringing it back to our Judaic roots, right? For me, at least, it's so much of Christianity has been to show that we have a new covenant, or to supersede being Jewish. And I don't think that's the case, right? I don't think that exceptionalism works well.
Right. Except for, well, yeah, I don't want to get off on another topic. I think the initial intent there was to go beyond the ethnic and religious, mostly ethnic divisions, and see all people as whole, rather than seeing it as particularly Christian. The first intent was to make it have all people brought in.
Inclusive in a way
it
that was
totally
radical.
inclusive,
Right,
not
and that's what Matthew was Great Commissions about.
Yeah, but we really got it figured out that didn't like that.
Right, yeah. I was speaking with somebody yesterday about conversion, right? So you have somebody who converts to a different whatever, right? And they become very zealous about that new experience as a new Catholic or a new Protestant or a new whatever. And what happens is you tend to leave that other piece of you behind, but you never really lose it. So that's not being inclusive.
Right.
So share with us your experience of harvest in light of your mission trip to the Philippines.
Well, the sense of harvest, that of go and be with the people and see the people and change lives. It was interesting in the thing, it says, don't go to far off lands. But the thing is that we are all the intersectionality of the United States and the Philippines and Palestine and other places too is something we cannot ignore.
Mm-hmm.
It puts us all together.
It gives us a responsibility.
Right. And so what's interesting is in the Philippines, about 70% or more of the population lives in poverty.
Wow.
And we don't really think about that because that's not the image we see of the Philippines when we have Marcos Jr. Coming here and living in extravagance. And so just driving around, being around, and we were split up into groups, and the four of us were taken into one section in Eastern Visayas, and we were our on-the-ground support, which was 3 people who traveled with us in a big van everywhere. We're all high responsibility in the United Church of Christ of the Philippines. One of them was a bishop, one of them was the national head of peace and justice thing, and one of them was the personal secretary to the general secretary, who is the head. So the United Church of Christ of the Philippines is just one of the denominations in the Philippines, but that's the one that we are obviously connected to.
Representing, yeah.
And so as they were taking us around, I saw a lot of poverty, but the poverty didn't surprise me. I've traveled a lot in third world countries or developing countries, and the ubiquitousness of it was everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. Even in the city, not in the middle where they have the high rises, but all around the edges. But what caught me more than anything, what broke my heart, was the fear that people are living in.
Mm-hmm.
The people are being arrested, they're being killed, they're being kidnapped, they're being red tagged, which just means that they're publicly declared to be communist. It's sort of like the mayor deciding I was a scourge. If you're the church in the Philippines, being red tagged undermines everything you try to do, but you are going to be red tagged because the church in the Philippines is a church that is out there working with the people, being there. As one of the bishops said to me, he said, the church, the only thing the church has to do is stand with the people who are oppressed and poor. Bottom line. There's nothing else. Nothing else for the church to be doing. Not even holding worship services. Not even gathering money. I mean, those might be part of the thing, but that's not what you're doing. You are fighting for those who are oppressed and poor. And so what happens right now in the Philippines, anyone who is working for the oppressed and the poor, anyone who is working against the powers and presence, I'm sorry to say, of the government that is killing the people. It's the government itself that is doing this. Anyone who stands against that is going to be targeted.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell you, if you were in the Philippines and somebody walked in and read your stuff here today, there would be flyers all over your neighborhood, and they'd buy billboards and say, Park Rose United Church of Christ is a communist organization. Do not trust them. If you go there, you will be known as a communist. Mm-hmm. That's the red tagging, and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So, but that's what's happening to the churches. But I was trying to think of the area of the questions here, but to get out of. But what I want to say is that they absolutely, it's not a thought process for them. It's the same energy as Jesus looking out on the crowd and saying, and having the heart broken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The heart is broken, and you get out there and do everything you can to heal the oppression. Well, you fight the oppression, which is the problem, right? Isn't it true that
and the weapon they're using is terror and fear.
right, terror and fear. But see, think about what we do here. We kind of draw the line. We can take care of poverty as much as we can. I myself am very active in a group that makes food and feeds the homeless every week. I mean, we're doing it. I only do it once a week. The group does it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do that, and I can feel good about what I'm doing, and that I'm doing good. But do I hit against the policies
The system.
that create
The
it?
system, yeah.
Do you hit against the system?
Mm-hmm.
How much do we not? We care and we want to care, but we do not hit against the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because even in the United States, if we do, we're going to get in trouble.
You do.
And we do get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And we might not, at this point, get imprisoned or killed, although look at what happened with Cop City.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. And the reason it's important to me that we here in the United States stand with the Philippines is that you may not know that on December 10th, 1898, there was an official meeting in Paris, that was the officials from the United States and the officials from Spain. Imagine, in Paris, in one country, officials from one country are meeting with another. Paris was just the location. Spain and the United States met at that time, and Spain sold the Philippines to the United States along with Guam and Puerto Rico for $20 million. Mm-hmm. How often we thought and learned in our thing that the United States won the Spanish-American War and liberated the Philippines from their colonizer, the Spanish. That is the biggest falsehood that we have ever, well, I tell you, of course, there's so many falsehoods in our, it's so many falsehoods in it, but it's the biggest falsehood. And the thing is, is that the United States was just as brutal, if not more brutal, to the people in the Philippines from that time in 1898 until we sort of felt like they were under our thumb a little bit more by getting into the 20s or so. But we had killed thousands and
Mm-hmm.
thousands and thousands and devastated their lands. It's one of the worst parts of our history, and it's one that we don't know.
Right, and that's why your work, when you said to me, because I thought you were doing something very different than what you said you were doing. So you tell us the story about the history behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and immediately I think that who gets to tell that story?
Right.
It's the winners, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're
Right.
going to the Philippines to document the stories of the people
Right.
that are being oppressed.
Right.
So those stories can be heard.
Exactly, and that was our task was twofold, and it was an official task. The first part of it was kind of scary because we interviewed people who have been their relatives have been killed. They've lost their homes. I could tell a couple stories, but I don't think we really have time for them. But these are people who could not tell their stories
tell it.
officially,
Right.
so they have no legal recourse. If they were to tell someone like this man who's the army came in and just mowed his farm down with they set up machine guns. His wife and children were there working on the farm. They just, flat down into the grass and laid there for 3 days while this went on. To make a story short, they all survived, but the mother has such an intense emotional breakdown that this has been 3 years and she is not able to
The trauma.
do anything. The trauma has totally taken her. But if he were to tell anyone that is what the army did to his land, he would be dead. Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Because that night, after they totally did everything, after 3 days of it, it was in the news, on TV, with his little hut, all the weapons in his hut there, saying that they had captured a rebel communist army camp. It's pure propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, you know how it happens? The money that the army, that the Philippines has for the army, that the army has, that has been given by us, they use it as bribes, because the army team that did that to the farmer got paid. They got paid for strafing, for taking out a rebel site. Nobody cares that it was a total falsehood.
That's the story that never gets in the history
And the
book.
story can't get in the legal system. So we were given an official task by legal services to hear these stories and document them. The documentation is very specific. It needs to be done exactly right. Our group of 4 did 24 documentations, and then those then are in somebody's hand. You just think about how those people's hands are in your work.
Mm-hmm.
And to do it right. But that was just the first part. The second part is what I'm doing now, to come back here and tell people what's happening. Because we don't know. And you know what? Who has the harvest hands? Who has the harvest hands that can make the biggest difference in this situation?
The voting people.
The voters of the United States.
That's right.
The voters of the United States. We are the most effective. In fact, we are the only effective harvest hands to make a difference. And right now, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but is that
fine.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
In front of our House of Representatives, there's a bill that's called the Philippines Human Rights Act, the PHRA. We're going to hear about it a little bit more here, but this is something that is my biggest message. You can go online. I can give you the online how to get there, or you can just Google
It comes up immediately. Yeah.
It comes up immediate. PHRA petition. Google that, and you get the petition. You can sign it. So your legislatures know that people want that in. So what happens? You say, well, I'm just one person, and maybe I'll get a couple more people to sign. It's not going to make a difference unless there's 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 signatures. Well, my friends, how do we get 50,000 signatures? 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. That's the only
we become
way
the
it
harvest
happens.
hands to get it out there.
All of
yeah.
us have to do
Mhm.
it. So it's so important. Just think about, I just told you one story of actually I heard about 30, just heart-wrenching, every single one of them breaking my heart. We had to document 24 of them. Imagine those, and I'm happy to tell some more stories later. Imagine those and those people afraid for their lives to tell anybody. Two of the people we interviewed were actually mothers. Their daughters, who are in their early 20s, are both in jail. They're in prison with non-bondable charges, so they can't get out. They've been in prison for 3 years. They have not even had an initial trial. There's nothing to hold the system accountable. These two young women had taken off a year of their studies to work for an agency of an alternative journalist agency that was sponsored by the Catholic Church. That was their crime. They are in jail. The mothers were afraid to come and talk because they didn't want to jeopardize any possibility of the girls getting out ever. The one gal wrote a letter. It was a note she wrote on the day that she would have graduated from the program that she was in. And she said, "Today I would have been graduating and would be excited to be looking forward to the internships that were offered to me. But here I am in this prison with no chance, really, that seems possible to get out. But I want to tell you, if I went back knowing what was going to happen, I would do the same thing again and again, because the people need to be helped. We need to stand with the people." And that's the wonderful thing about the idea of the harvest, that it's the whole earth. It's not even a people. It's not even a group of oppressed people. It's the whole earth that is hurting.
Yep.
And the harvest is for the harvest of love, the harvest of health, of well-being, of humanity and nature. Is there a better harvest that any of us can ask for than that? That all life is sacredly held, honored, and supported? That's the harvest.
Right. Yeah. Very well said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I get a little carried away.
That's okay. You're passionate about your work, I understand. So you said something very important to me when we met last week. You said that the churches in the Philippines have a lot to teach us here about faith.
Yeah.
I really want to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of implied it, because the thing is the absolute commitment to justice for the oppressed and the people in poverty, the absolute commitment to justice over anything else, and that they're willing to lose their churches, which they are, because what the red tagging does is it scares everyone in the village away from that church.
They're living in survival mode.
They're absolutely survival mode, but they are not feeling like they're in the survival mode, because they are alive. They're alive with their commitment. Here in the United States,
it's about our buildings, our committees.
right, it's about our building, it's about our committees. It doesn't matter. Here we are, we're in a progressive church, and we look at the Christian nationalists as abhorrent. But we're all on the same thing. We're just a little bit not so far along of putting most of our effort into keeping ourselves intact.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the Philippine church, that's not all of them, but the ones that I met with, they know there's no life in that. If you stay intact and the world is falling around you, what have you gotten?
Yeah.
But that's not even why you do it. But I just want to say that I've been in the United Church of Christ my entire career. I've been in very progressive churches. My churches all love me, and I talk like this for the last 35 years. You have to believe me.
That's why you're a scourge.
But we don't take that step to stand against the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we stood against the system, would we lose our building? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Yeah, I often think if we went into the school systems and we asked them about their curriculum, what books they were teaching,
right?
And we made a real point of we want history that represents all voices,
right?
How that would be taken in the community,
right. Yeah, but we don't go that extra mile. We go far enough to make us feel self-righteous.
We do charity. We do
charity.
And charity makes us feel good. It's a little Band-Aid on the problem.
Right.
It helps. Charity, there's nothing wrong in and of itself. But
right now, there are people dying. Well, they've been dying everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're dying in the Philippines. They're dying in the United States. They're dying in Atlanta. And we don't have the space to choose not to step out with the same commitment that the UCCP has in Palestine. The UCCP, United Church of Christ of the Philippines, and the National Council of Churches of the Philippines were the two faith organizations that created this thing. But there were Catholics, Mennonites, Buddhists, UCC. I was the only UCC person on the delegation. So it's a very much interfaith. But those churches, in one group, when they went to the place where they were supposed to go do the same as we did, go to all these places and have these interviews, when they got off the plane, there were bulletin boards all around the community saying UCCP and NCCP are communist organizations. Any money you give to them goes to the New People's Army. This was plastered when they came off the plane to do the work. It was plastered all over. They had to, but you know what? They just totally reconfigured how they did it and got it done under the. But so the churches might be losing some members, but they're gaining people who stand with the mission, but are perfectly happy not putting their life in their hands by going in their church. Because why do that? Why do that? Mm-hmm. Because what does that mean? Going into church, if you decide that you're going to fight them by going to church, that's an arrogance. That's an arrogance that says the church is what matters, not the mission.
The mission, yeah. Very well said, yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, what we get from Matthew's gospel.
Yeah.
It's about the mission.
Yeah.
It's about if you hear the good news for all of people and all of the world and everything created, it's not about the community. It's about what the community does together.
Right.
And that's the justice
And I don't think
piece.
we're going to be pressed in the United States until we have really hit bottom inside of a fascist government.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to say that.
I kind of agree
but
with you on that.
we're not. The church is going to keep thinking,
we're
going to...
too comfortable.
Yeah, we're going to be comfortable because we are part of the comfortable.
Right, we're part of the
Right.
system of status quo.
Right. In the United Church of Christ, we're, our one line of Congregationalists, and so many of our hymns, everything, we are the colonists here.
Right, sure, because
And when we gather in, I call it a museum of colonist culture. That's what's happening.
Right, we
when
ask people
gather.
to come in our doors,
Yeah.
right? We say we welcome you,
Mhm.
but learn our Reformed Dutch hymns, learn this, learn
Mhm.
that, and that's all from colonization.
Right,
Even the format of service itself.
right,
Yeah.
right. Even the buildings.
Yeah.
So it's hard for us to see ourselves that way. It's
Yeah.
hard for us to
It
see
is.
ourselves that way.
That's total deconstruction, right?
Exactly. And that's why, another reason why I bring up the colonization of the Philippines, because that's when we can start to see that and see what we've done to the indigenous people here and the lands, we can start to see how abhorrent we are.
Right, and it breaks our heart.
And it breaks our heart.
And rightfully, we are part of, like Randy Woodley said, when we do those acts with the oppressor, we're actually hurting ourselves as well.
Exactly.
Right? So the pain is not just for the other.
Exactly.
The pain is an inward pain for us too.
Precisely.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a long way to go, and fortunate for us, there are teachers like the people in the Philippines who are putting their lives on the line for the people. And the least we can do is go online and sign that petition. That's the start.
That's the takeaway.
And that's the takeaway today. Tell your friends, tell your family, show up at your friend's house with your iPad and show them that they can get right in there and sign it. It's real easy. It doesn't hurt us. That's why we're willing to do it. Now, it may be that at some point under a different kind of government or under this government being a little bit more bold against us, they might pull out those names. So 5,000 people stood against us here. We're going to go round those people up. I have to tell you, I've said from the very beginning, if they're rounding people up ever, and they haven't taken me, I haven't done my job. That's it. I haven't lived my life. And I just hope that all of us can get just a little bit of spark to go sign the Philippine Human Rights Act.
Thank you. Thank you for the work
I'll
you're
shut
doing.
up now.
Would you read the poem back to us?
Oh,
And you'll be with us in fellowship, so if you want to
Yes,
tell more
yeah.
of our stories, okay, that's
yeah,
great.
exactly.
Got it?
And there's a couple people here that are part of the organizations that I work with for Philippine Solidarity. And I think, will you guys be able to stay after a bit? So we all talk.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll read the poem here. God gives to us, let us share. God of love and justice, give us our daily bread in this way. Give us strength to work the land, to sow and harvest and share and eat. Give us the particular bread of each and every day, not grabbing the bread of tomorrow, nor the meal of the day after tomorrow, so that we are not tempted to confide in our own security, but instead in you and in your providence. Awaken with us this ambition only, that we neither desire nor hoard that which belongs to others, nor strip them unfairly, but learn to respect and collaborate. Free us, deliver us from selfish greed. Separate us from our temptation to indefinite growth. Do not let us fall into selfish pride, feelings that are merely pretense, nor a love that is seeking only the applause of others. Grant us a new heart, God, Father, and Mother, so that we are able to call each day good and call all of the world sister and brother. May we be neighbors, always sharing whatever we have, for we are seated at the same table in this world, and hope finally to sit with you at the abundant table of your holy realm.
Thank you, and
That's
thank
the
you for
poem.
being at this table with me.
Thank you.